And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Ryan and I back once again to discuss Survivor 45, episode 11. What's up, Ryan?
Dylan, I'm doing well. I thought this was a really interesting strategic episode. I feel like definitely a very good episode of the season. I don't know if I would say my favorite. I feel like the Kelly boot still is at the top for me, but this was a really fun episode. I can't wait to break it all down with you.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much to talk about here. Like, I think in terms of here's the thing. I think ultimately, like, the Kelly boot was the best, most unexpected move of the season. But at the same time, this move, I think, had so many differing opinions. And I mean, I already tell you that my opinion differs from a lot of ones that I've seen on Reddit, on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the main thing here is like there's so many conflicting opinions, and there will be no way to confirm whether or not I'm right or the person on Twitter is right or the person on Reddit's right until we see how this season ends up playing out. So I'm excited to get into it here, and I'm excited to talk about not only a little bit of what happened in episode 11, but also look ahead to the penultimate episode and the outlook of the rest of the season.
Yeah. No, I think that, there's a lot of questions that we're not going to know until we get to the end of the season, like you just said, whether someone made the right move or not. And there's a lot of also questions that we still have to figure out. Like, we still don't know what's happened in the last two episodes with Austin's idol with Julie. Like, we don't know if he ever asked for it back, if she's holding on to it like a hostage. Like, so we don't know what's going to happen, but I'm really excited to kind of go over Julie's move, Emily's move, and we can look back at some other moves as well. But obviously very sad in this episode to lose Emily. I mean, Dylan, what a redemption arc for Emily.
Yeah, I think after the first episode, me, you, and everybody else was on podcasts on Twitter and being like, who is this girl? Is she going to be like this the rest of the season? Like, I don't know if I could deal with this person on my TV screen for more than an episode or two. And then all of a sudden, a complete 180. What a redemption arc for Emily. And let's just say that while she said that she is not interested in returning as of now, per her exit interview, let's just say that she will be getting a call back sooner or later the next time they have returnees. So hopefully she changes her mind by then, because I do hope that we get another chance to see Emily play. What a character she was.
It's so funny, and maybe the universe knew that we were going to be talking tonight. I was just on my phone while I was making dinner, and I just randomly got recommended the video like best Emily moments of the season. So I got to actually go back for like 5 minutes and see the first episode clips of her. And you're right, it was like night and day. I came on the podcast and I said to you, I don't want to say this because I was wrong about Gabler, but I'm like, I don't think Emily can win after one episode. And clearly I was wrong. Emily was voted out because she was a threat to win, because people saw she was playing a really great game. So I hope she changes her mind, but I would love to see Emily again.
Yeah, and we normally go through chronologically, discuss the episode. Here, I think it's more so appropriate that we can kind of discuss what the end game of this episode was and how it, goes forward, and we're mostly focused on that. I think as soon as this episode started and they got back from tribal council, Emily immediately was like owning up to her move, so excited to make that move. And like, oh, I told Bruce that Julie was going after you, and that's how I, prevented him from playing his idol and tried to make it seem like that Julie was the target tonight. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off in everybody's head and was like, you know what? We all really like Emily. I think that Emily's playing a great game. And then all of a sudden, Emily becomes a target from that moment on. It appeared so, right? Once everybody kind of knew that that was her move, they became afraid to sit next to her in the end. So I think this was obviously clearly a huge blunder by Emily immediately within the episode, to the point where she could have just stayed quiet and been like, hey guys, like, we finally got out Bruce. Like, what a great job by everyone. And instead she was like, I can't believe it. I told Bruce this, and this is what happened. And everyone's like, oh, so that's how he didn't play his idol. You know what I mean? So it was tough. It was tough. I mean, I think that, in the moment it's tough, to, I guess, control your emotions and figure out, maybe not saying anything's the best thing for my game. I think that's a tough thing to do. And I think that she would definitely like to have that one back for sure. So, pretty crazy that, we saw that so early in this episode, and it ends up being part of her demise in this game.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, no, I think what I've heard from her and her exit press is basically like, Julie, obviously we see why he doesn't play his idol, but Julie is saying, I'm not sure why Bruce would vote for me because I thought Bruce and I had a good connection. And it turns out Bruce and Julie were pretty close out there. So he could have targeted anybody else. He could have targeted Drew. He could have targeted Austin. He could have been mad at Katura, but he instead writes, Julie's name down. And, Emily felt like, I have to explain why Bruce would write down Julie's name. And in the process, like you said, maybe got a bit carried away and was like, well, this is Julie, why he wrote down your name. Also because I told him X, Y, and Z. And then everyone's like, whoa, not only do we like Emily a lot, she's really, grown on us as a person, but she's really making moves here now. And she has a great story as the last surviving Lulu. So her target really increased. Obviously, we'll go into the journey. Maybe that also increased her target even more. But definitely, you could tell early on in the episode, the warning signs were flashing for Emily.
Right. Yeah, I think it's tough. I think, again, like it's a tough thing to do in real time to, be like, I can't say anything about my move, when at the same time you want to make sure that people know what you're doing so that they vote for you in the end. But at some point you got to just be like, all right, some things I got to wait to tell the jury at the end of the game. So that's a tough thing. But let's also talk about here, Emily ends up being the vote, right? But do we think this was the right move for everybody involved, right? So obviously, Julie ends up playing the idol that we were kind of shocked. I know we spoke about this last week, but I didn't even know until you put it in our notes for the episode that we look at while we do the podcast. I didn't even realize that Julie still had the idol, Austin's idol, until you wrote it down and made a note of it here last week before your podcasting. I was like, oh, there's no way that Julie still has that idol. She had to have given it back to Austin. Clearly not the case here. She thought the idol was hers and she was not going to give that back, right? So in this situation, we have, a vote that could pretty much clearly go to Julie. It was in pretty much everybody's interest at the beginning. Drew, Katura, Jake, Austin. So it seemed, I should say, and Emily to put their votes on Julie and try to get her out. But the issue was that obviously Julie had this idol. So they could have pulled the vote off still, and Julie would have never seen it coming had Austin not said anything, right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing here. So Austin ends up telling D. D ends up telling Julie. The information on the vote gets back to Julie, and then Julie ends up playing her idol, which eventually leads to Emily going home. So much to unpack here. And the first question that I think everybody is wondering is, was this the right move for Julie to still put her votes on, who put her sole vote, I should say, because D still voted Julie to make it seem like she wasn't close to Julie or didn't tell her what, didn't want to give away what happened, or what the exact sequence of events was. So she puts her vote on Julie. Sole vote from Julie goes on Emily. So all it took was one vote. Why did she vote out Emily compared to Austin? That's the real question. Was this the right move for Julie to go with Emily instead of Austin? What do you think, Ryan?
I think it was. Now, obviously, on the surface, it looks like a terrible move. Austin is a physical guy. He's a likable guy. He's aligned with a lot of people. And why not break up D and Austin? Why not break up Austin and Drew? You, Julie, already seen as a threat. Why not kind of like sneak back into the shadows by taking out Austin? Now D and Drew will go for each other and all this stuff. And I feel like on the surface, that's kind of what we thought. And I think people also are kind of caught up in the moment of like, well, we're sad Emily left, so we're going to be pissed at Julie because she voted out Emily. Because at first it does seem like it's the wrong move. I think if you dive deeper into it, what could happen if Julie votes out Austin? Yes, she can kind of maybe reposition the game board, but you take out D's number one ally, and we can get into that too, how D tells Julie to her face, well, Austin's my number one in addition to you, Julie, which was pretty crazy. But by blindsiding D at that vote and taking out Austin when she asks you not to, says, let's vote for Emily, I'm warning you to play your idol. I didn't have to tell you anything tonight, but I'm telling you to play your idol to please vote out Emily because she's saying your name. You blindside D at this vote. Yeah, some people think, well, D will come running back to you if you take out her number one, but like D could really, we see how D gets what she wants. She could be very pissed at Julie, be like, you know what, Julie, you're already a threat. I asked you not to do this. you got to go next week. And Julie really could only be increasing her threat level more. I mean, we see all the time in the new era, people like Omer, like Carson, like who people make a big move and then they get targeted very soon afterwards. So by Julie taking a major swing at Austin, you risk losing D as an ally, and you might be even more of a threat next week when you maybe could have tried to like get the target shifted more to like Drew or someone like that. And furthermore, I would say that with Julie doing this, you know, by taking out Emily, it's the right move, Dylan, because first and foremost, Emily is publicly saying your name. Like, yeah, everybody wrote down Julie's name, of course, but Emily is going to consistently go after you. So it's not a bad thing to take that piece off the board if she's always going after you. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. I'm wondering if they align with mine, but what do you think?
So for Julie specifically, for sure the right move, in my opinion, to vote out Emily. I know a lot of people want to see the big move happen. Austin give away his idol and then get voted out by that person he gave the idol to. Would have been an all-time Survivor move, I guess I should say, because I don't even want to say move, because again, I think it was the right move to take out Emily. Would have been like an all-time Survivor blunder or error, I should say, had he done that. That would have turned up in Ghost Island 2 for sure. But let's just say, you know, in this situation, right? If we look forward to next week, I could already tell you Julie has the biggest target on her back out of anybody left on that beach. And I mean, this is pretty clear to me based on what we've seen. I think the players basically have been telling us Julie's a huge threat. And now we see her make this move where she is the sole vote, plays the idol, and is the sole vote that sends home Emily, right? As a result, she's going to be the biggest threat on this beach. She doesn't have an idol to protect her. I have a hard time seeing, even with this play for Emily, how she kind of recovers next week. I think she's going to face a major uphill battle, and she may need to win immunity to survive another day on the island. That being said, had she voted out Austin instead, in my opinion, she basically seals her fate in the game. If she votes out Austin, I think we've seen, based on Dee's personality, I think Dee turns on her in a second. Drew would not be happy. Drew already was against her, basically. Drew's not happy, right? So you have those two immediately against you. You've been working with those two the entire game. Her only chance, really, I guess, would have been, and again, she was going after Emily the entire week, so I don't really think that connection would have happened. Your only chance of basically surviving is if she voted out Austin, she could have probably tried to pull in Jake and Couture for move, and then even then it's just 3-3. And Jake and Couture have been wild cards, bouncing back and forth between moves, basically on what they're needed by the entire season. So there's no guarantee that at all. I think she completely loses D if she votes out Austin. Now, if you look at this situation, right? Clearly, she was really mad at Drew because Drew was the original person who thought of the idea of voting out Julie, and Julie knew that, right? So, Austin was not the one who came up with that plan. He was ultimately the one who, I guess, would have been carrying out the plan, right? Drew was really the one who brought up Julie's name. Drew is the one who needs to be voted out if you're Julie in her mind. The issue is that sorry for we got some noise in the back here. I mean, this is ridiculous, but noisy apartments here. But anyway, Julie, right? If she does vote out Austin, right? She loses D. Julie. I lost my train. I completely lost my train of thought. But bottom line is that if she does vote out Austin, right? Drew definitely against her. D definitely against her. Basically could probably force a 3-3, but that's it. And now if you look towards next week where she wants to get Drew out of the game, right? Because Drew is ultimately the one who did this move. She still is going to have D with her in order to do that. And she's going to have Austin with her because at this point, D and Austin are a package. So you have them. Whereas in the past, if you rewrite the events and you basically voted out Austin instead, you lose those numbers. You become the immediate target. You lose D. I think in order for her to potentially go to Final 5, she needs to have D and Austin to get with her in this game. So in my opinion, for Julie to go as far as she possibly could, this was the right move to vote out Emily. Simple as that.
Yeah. And I think to that point, we have to give D a lot of credit here. And I'm sure, once we get through the rest of the episode and we look to next week, I'm sure we're going to get into who's in the most trouble and, who's in the best spot. I think I'm ready to finally say, Dylan, that I think D is our clear front runner. Because for a while, we've been saying it's the Reba 4, and, it's too soon to really tell who's the front runner. This isn't like an Omer or like a Jesse or a Carson where it was like extremely obvious. I feel like you could make an argument for Drew, Austin, or D, maybe even Julie. But Dylan, after this week, not only has D eliminated her target every single week, from Caleb to Kelly to Kendra to Bruce. She was fine with Bruce going, but now Emily, she's taken out her target every week. She has both of her number ones in the game because she's close with Austin, obviously, in that showmance, and then she's still really tight with Julie, of course. So she has her true number ones. And looking into next week, Dylan, even with D being a big threat, I still don't think she's that high on the target list. I would say, like you said, Julie's probably in the most trouble next week. Next, probably Drew. Drew's spot has gotten a bit weaker. And then maybe people go after Austin again. I really feel like D is heading into a great spot next week. So even though Julie gets a lot of credit this week because she made the actual move with her idol, I really feel like D's winner equity has gone really way up.
And this is the same thing Stephen Fishback tweeted this week. He said, once again, D gets exactly what she wants. I mean, every single week we've seen basically the vote go exactly her way. She wants Kendra out. She goes. She wanted Caleb out. He goes. She wants Julie to stay this week and Emily out. It happens. Everything is going D's way. And again, next week, I think the vote next week is going to be between Julie and Drew, right? It looks like they're going to be the ones butting heads based on, the preview. It looks like they're fighting. Julie maybe going to confront Drew. Drew's still going to want to get out Julie. Julie has a huge target on her back. So I think if you're D, you're like perfectly shielded. I think one of the things with D here is she's played a near flawless game. I mean, people kind of brought her up as the a main threat early merge, and we heard, I believe Caleb said that she thought that he thought that D was the most dangerous player in the game. Somebody said that. I believe it was Caleb. He thought that D was extremely, threatening and dangerous early in this merge. And now we're getting to the point where we're not so many D names. We're getting to the point where Drew is literally saying to Austin, I don't really think D, or not to Austin, to whoever he's talking to on the when they showed it, but Drew said, he's like, I don't really think D's is that big of a threat anymore. And that's incredible. We talk on this podcast week after week. If you're D and you're pulling out, we talk week after week on this podcast. If you're somebody who's pulling off all these moves, how do you keep your threat level low? And D is doing it to a T.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I meant to say as well is that because D did all these great things right, and by her telling Julie, you got to vote out Emily here, I'm sure Julie thought this as well, but I'm also going to give Dee the partial credit because she brought this move, or she brought up the whole idol plan to Julie as well. By taking out Emily as well, you also weaken Drew, because Emily, even though she had a final 3 supposedly with Austin and Drew, we could all see since the swap, she was a bit closer with Drew than Austin. So you also weaken Drew in that way as well. And like both of us have mentioned, I think next week, it really seems like Dee and Julie are going to finally go to war against Austin and Drew. The Reba Civil War is finally here, and I really feel like it's going to come down to who can pick up Jake and Katurah. And I feel like, Dylan, if you had to place your chips, I would feel like Dee and Julie are going to win the war, because even though Austin has the idol, so he can kind of save himself or Drew next week, because next week is the last chance he can play his idol, because it's the idol amulet of Final 6, by the way. That's the key differentiator, because Julie had the Final 5 idol. I really feel like Katurah is more likely to go with the women, and I feel like even though Jake just had the barbecue reward with the guys, he and Drew still didn't get along last week, so I also feel like Jake would maybe swing for the guys as well. So if we're gonna have a Reba Civil War, I really do feel like Jake and Katurah are gonna get won over by Dee and Julie, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I feel like Dee and Julie are gonna win this war. I'm not sure if Dee and Julie win the war. I know Dee is ultimately gonna win a war. That's my thought. I could see, even if Julie does go home this week, which I think Drew, if I had to choose one, I think Drew goes home next episode. But if Julie does go home, I still think that Dee is positioned really, really well. So we'll have to see what happens. But let's talk about another big storyline this episode, right? I saw, and I'm sure you saw the same, Austin getting an insane amount of hate for what happened this episode. Obviously Emily had a massive fan base, a massive amount of people wanting her to win. And ultimately, Austin is a major reason why that is not happening. Obviously we had this whole showmance kind of take even a further step this week, because we've seen rumors of it the entire season, but at this point we didn't get confirmation that it was actually a thing. And now this week we had that whole segment where we're getting Rob and Amber clips from All Stars literally shown as a flashback. By the way, side note, one of the funniest things I've ever seen on Survivor, he goes, Austin, direct quote, he's like, he says to D, one of my favorite moments on Survivor ever was All Stars, the whole Boston Rob and Amber thing. One of the funniest things ever. The classic Shaq meme. I apologize, I wasn't familiar with your game, but hilarious. That was really the point where it was like, for real though. That all jokes aside, hilarious moment. But this was the first time that we really got confirmation from Austin and D that or at least Austin, that the showmance actually kind of is a thing, right? And a lot of people hating on Austin for going back to D with this information that the Julie vote was about to happen. Now, a lot of people are saying, how could you do that? Austin just sunk his game. Austin has no chance to win. And honestly, I think this is the major controversy, one of the major controversies in this episode, and one that I kind of disagree with the masses on. I think that if you're in Austin spot, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, Ryan, right?
Yeah.
D is your number one. He's made that clear to us that D is his number one, even more than Drew, even though the entire game, him and Drew have had that kind of working relationship. But, it seems like they want to bring each other to the end, or at least Austin for sure does not want to vote D out of the game. D is his number one, right? You cannot, I think one of the biggest things with a successful alliance or showmance or anything, you have to understand the way that your alliance member thinks in Survivor. And based on what we've seen with D, I would have not been surprised had Austin not disclosed that information. I would have not been surprised for D to completely do a 180 on Austin, maybe in terms of the game, and not trust him anymore. Because that would have been massive information to hide. Obviously, Austin would have known about the situation. Julie would have gone home, and D would have kind of been left stranded in the dark, not knowing what had happened. So I think that if you're Austin, you have to think to yourself, okay, the best way for me to get to the end is probably working with D right now. That cannot happen if I don't relay the information, because I think that she'll turn on me if that happens. So I think a lot of people are kind of getting, emotional in terms of their thoughts. And ironically, I say people are getting emotional. Austin, definitely there is some emotion in this decision. But I also think that if you're Austin, you have to make sure that D is happy in this situation, right? You want to work with her going forward. You cannot leave her in the dark on something this big. And as a result, I think Austin ended up making the right play to kind of tell D what was going on and then let her decide basically from there what to do. I know he had all the confessionals telling us I don't think D will say anything. Let's be honest. He knew D would say anything. And I think that, if you're Austin spot, whether he meant to do it or not, I think that you look at, the Drew Emily thing here. I think if you're Austin, you also cut out that scenario, right? Drew, like you said, is weaker. So I think that overall, this is probably a good move for Austin that I think a lot of people are not seeing as such. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, the fact that Austin told D what was going on.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a really complex question. And I think, again, this is why I said that at the start, this episode is going to be so much fun to break down, because we still have a couple more things that, we have to discuss, Emily's decisions as well. Why did people not split the votes? People are screaming at the TV. Why are people not splitting votes anymore on Survivor? But so to your point about Austin, was it the right move or not to tell D? Because I agree with the basic thought, on paper, obviously bad move on paper to tell D, because she's going to run back to Julie. What's going to blow up. Julie's going to play her idol, and Austin's lucky that D basically was like, Julie, you have that look in your eye. Do not write Austin's name down. I know you're mad at him. Please do not write Austin. Please vote Emily. And I think we also can probably assess, Dylan, that why did Austin not play his idol? Probably because he got assurances from Dee and Julie off camera that we didn't see, that she's like, all right, fine, I'm going to vote Emily. Because I feel like in that scenario, Julie stands up. If you're Austin and you're scared your name's going to be written down, you play your idol as well. So I don't think it was the right move for Austin to tell Dee, because clearly he could have gotten himself voted out there. The reason why I kind of agree with you that he had to do it is because he was privy to the information, because it looks much worse if it looks bad that he told Dee, and people think, well, now Austin can't keep a secret. Austin, kind of screwed our plan to get Julie out here, but he at least kept Dee as an ally. It looks a lot worse if you don't tell Dee and Julie goes home, and then next week people try to vote Austin out, and Dee's like, I don't want to vote out Austin. And then people say, well, did you know he was aware about the Julie plan? And then Dee loses, like you said, loses all trust in him. So I wish he didn't have to tell her, because it really could have screwed him over.
I think
he was kind of like handcuffed to by that information. He
right.
had to do something with that.
Right. If there's any reason to criticize Austin, in my opinion, it's the fact that he never asked for his idol back from Julie. Right. That's
well, I hope he asked for it back.
Right. Or yeah, that he either never asked for it back or never got it back. Right. Or gave it away in the first place. Right. It's like, if that doesn't happen, then this is never even like a discussion. Right. Everything turns out differently. So I think that, again, I still think it was the right move. But we'll have to see. Again, I think that Austin's best path forward was doing this. And we will see what happens next week. I think that, look, all he has left is the amulet, because Julie had the idol that goes to final 5. The amulet could be played only till final 6. And he's playing that for himself next week. Let's just be clear. At least I think. Yeah. I think that, well, let me rephrase. He's safe next week because he has that, right? Do I think he could give it away? I think, honestly, and I see a few people in the comments chiming in being like, well, is it possible he plays it for somebody else next week? Ironically, I think we could get the exact situation almost in an opposite direction next week, where Julie and Dee really want to vote out Drew, and Austin, if he knows about the plan, could easily turn around and give his amulet to Drew. And it could be literally the reverse Reba, and the Rebas keep trying to get rid of each other, and they just can't do it because they're so tight, which would be an unbelievable situation if basically the reverse thing happens. And to be clear about the reverse thing, it would be Julie, Dee, and then let's say Katurah and Jake, the 4 of them wanting to vote out Drew. And then we'll see if that information would be shared by Dee to Austin. I think that would be a fascinating scenario, which I think we may end up getting, right? It's like the opposite situation. Will Dee do the same thing that Austin did and tell him? Or will Dee do what Austin didn't do and withhold the information, and then they won't know? Austin will play the idol for himself just because he has to play it. Drew will go home. Or will Dee go with Austin to the situation, go to Austin with the situation, and Austin will say, I'm not going to play it because I think now's the time for Drew to go? Or will he say, I want to go to the end with Drew, and I want Julie to go home because I think Julie's a bigger threat. I think I could more easily beat Drew. I'm going to play my idol for Drew and let Julie go home. That would be absolutely fascinating, and kind of almost Austin playing in a complete circle, but I guess it would work out because he would get Emily and Julie both out of the game, 2 players who he sees as a big threat. So much that could happen next week, and it really is fascinating. And I'm so curious to know if that opposite situation does occur next week, because it'd be a crazy occurrence of events.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it all really comes down to, and I was going to say it comes down to immunity, because if Austin wins immunity, this is where this whole question comes up. Like, if he's safe next week, regardless, will he save Dee with it? If she's in trouble, I don't feel like Dee will be in trouble. So then the question becomes, is he still really tight with Drew? I mean, every episode we see at least one scene where Drew and Austin are Steven and JT talking by themselves. So yeah, if Drew's in trouble next week, I could see him playing it for Drew if Austin ends up safe. But then again, Austin, as we have seen, is a very selfless player. He's not a very selfish player at all. And even if Austin is vulnerable and he doesn't win immunity, I could see a scenario where everyone says at the TV, just play it on yourself. It's guaranteed. Last night you can play it, lock in your final 5 spots. But I could see a scenario where next week, it's like you mentioned, Julie or Drew going home, and he doesn't want to lose Drew because maybe he feels like my best chance of getting to final three is to be in the final four with at least one or two of D and Drew, because either I'll win and take them, they'll win and take me. So he wants Austin probably wants to keep both of them in for the next two votes before we get to fire making. So I could see a scenario where if Drew's name is being brought up, I could see Austin playing it on him, even if he doesn't have immunity. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now we actually got. I think right now, if I had to take a guess, I think D is going to end up winning the season based on what we saw happen this week. Again, she got exactly what she wants. It seems like she's so well like kind of boxed in socially where she's shielded. And I think there's a high chance she gets to the final three. Now, if D gets to the final three, I think she wins the game. So, the fact that I think that she has the best pitch right now to the jury, maybe outside of Julie, I think maybe she has a struggle to win if she goes with Julie. I think there's very small chance that both of them end up getting there. I think Julie really has the uphill battle to get there because everybody's seen her as the big threat. She probably would need to win out on immunities in order to get there at this point. Because I'm thinking that once she is, again, even if Drew is the vote next week, she's in major trouble at final five, right? She would have to win immunity to survive that. So yeah. I think if I had to guess, D is going to be the winner. But I do think that, we'll have to see what happens. I think the final four could be D, Austin, Katurah, and Jake. And we did, if you caught it, and I know a lot of people caught it, maybe a little foreshadowing in Fire as we saw Katurah and Jake practicing Fire with each other. And I know that foreshadowing Fire is a thing that we saw all of last season with Carson. Everybody knew that he was going to eventually be in Fire. We haven't seen that at all this season. I know that people have asked in the comment section, hey, have you guys seen any of that? Did you pick up on anything so far? No, until now. And if we do get that final four, let's just say that D and Austin one of them win immunity and are in position to make the decision of who goes to Fire. Do they take each other to the final two and put Jake and Katurah in Fire with each other and just say, may the best person win? Or does Austin put D in Fire and realize that he has to do it in order to ensure that he has the best chance to win? Does D put Austin in Fire to ensure that she has the best chance to win? Do both of them go together? And that was what the true Rob Amber comparison came from. Like, so much could happen here. But I think that I'm pretty confident that we're going to see Jake and Katurah in the final four. I think I'm pretty confident in it.
I mean, look, speaking of Katurah and fire making, I mean, my favorite part of the episode was Katurah shitting on fire making. Nothing made me happier than seeing. Nothing made me happier than seeing.
A lot of people love that.
Yeah, no, nothing made me happier than seeing Katurah being like, "This is so stupid that we have Final Four Fire." Because if you don't have Final Four Fire and you have a regular vote at Final Three, what would happen, Dylan? If Reba somehow makes it to Final Four, we could see a really cool vote where they have to turn on each other. But obviously that ruins it. There was a couple old school things kind of mentioned in this episode that were a lot of fun. And one of the old school things I wanted to ask you about was the journey, because Emily chose not to play on the journey. And I'm sure production and Jeff were like, oh, I hate that people didn't play on the journey. And God forbid everybody has their votes. Everybody voted at tribal council. Novel concept. But you would agree, right, that Emily made the right move to not play in this challenge.
Yes. I think that even with her getting voted out, like, she made the right move, right? I think that there was no chance she was getting that puzzle. And I don't know if you saw Carson had a tweet.
I saw it. It looked like, impossible.
He's like, here's what you would have had to do. Plus, it's not like they're there for 3 hours. It would have been like 10 minutes to do the puzzle. So
yeah,
it would have been impossible. And final 7 vote is huge. She doesn't know that Julie has an idol. I think that she did not suspect that at all. I don't think anybody suspected that Julie could have an idol. It's like, you had to keep your vote for a final 7 vote. You just have to, especially when the chances of you completing the puzzle are so slim. So I think she made the right choice. It was nice for a player finally to keep their vote in a situation where I thought they absolutely had to. Again, still ends up not working out for her, but I'm happy that she did keep it because I think it was the right move.
Well, I also saw people asking on Twitter that night of the episode, people were saying, if Emily didn't even want to go in the first place? Why did she draw the rocks? Because we saw Jake say that he wants to go, and people were like, oh, well, I'm a little bit nervous about Jake. Let's all say that we want to go and we'll draw rocks. And then that person will go to the island for the journey. And people were like, if Emily didn't want to go in the first place and she wanted to stay at camp because when she left, her name started to get thrown around more, why would she put her hands in the bag? And I guess Emily said in the exit press, like, you don't want to stand out and people are already looking at me. And if I say that I don't want to partake in the rock draw to go on the journey, people might just feel like, oh, Emily's the one person that's abstaining. That looks a bit weird. So she kind of like felt forced or like peer pressured to put her hand in the bag. But like, that's why she went on the journey. Because I could tell she didn't want to do it from her confessional. And like we saw, she goes on the journey. And then right away at camp, people are like, yeah, Emily just took out Bruce. She's a big threat. She's got to go. So yeah.
Definitely. Look, as soon as a person pulled up in the boat and there was a time for a journey, I was like, oh no, do we have to put in a journey at final 7? Like, and we saw without anybody's vote being taken away, without any of that, like it was a great episode, a great vote.
Imagine that.
So I don't think that's a coincidence. And I know we spoke about that so many times. I'm trying to think, is there any, like, what other stuff should we go through here within this episode? The immunity challenge. I was gonna say the immunity challenge was absolutely hilarious. And you know what's so funny is that I was the same way as Austin. I did not realize that it had to be double-sided also. So I'm literally I was doing the same thing as Austin. I was reading, I forgot what the word was. Do you remember? Resourcefulness, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Resourcefulness. I'm reading Austin's thing and I'm like, what do you mean? He has it right. I did not know that it had to be double-sided, which was funny. But yeah, what other things do you want to go over here?
I will say though, really quickly, that was pretty funny. And like Austin said, sometimes when you're in the challenge, you try to like tune Jeff out and like you're just so focused. And he didn't even realize what Jeff was saying. Like, hey, do both sides, and he didn't even pick up on that. I think we covered the main points. The thing that I also would bring up is, Emily a little bit more, because this is kind of like our Emily eulogy. A lot of people, Dylan, were asking, and I'm curious your thoughts. Why didn't Emily throw a stray vote onto people? Because if Emily knew that every single person's writing Julie, and again, like you mentioned, this is the 4th time in history that this has happened, with Lauren in Triple H, Sandra in Winners at War, and then Maddie last season in 44, where something gets taken out by only 1 vote. If you're Emily and you know that everyone's voting Julie, why do you not say, okay, just in case she pulls out an idol or shot in the dark, let me throw a vote onto somebody else? I have my opinion, but what do you think she should have thrown a stray vote, or why don't you think she threw a stray vote?
Yeah, I don't think that she knew everybody was voting Julie. I think that's the main thing, right? Like, I think she probably thought that Julie and Dee were going to go on her. And then if she throws a stray vote, right? Then if she throws a stray vote, Julie plays the idol. And in a situation where like 2 votes are going on her, then it doesn't matter. So I think she probably thought she was getting more than just 1 vote. I think that's the main thing. I think this is one of those things that like you watch and you're like in hindsight, like, oh, how did she not play? How did she not throw a stray vote? And even she was like, oh, I feel like an idiot for not throwing a stray vote. But I don't think, like, realistically, like, yes, you should have. But I also think that it had to be that she was afraid that, if she threw a stray vote, then it would end up mattering in the wrong way, if that makes sense. I think that she thought that more votes were going on her, and not just like all the votes were going on Julie. And that's the main reason why she didn't bother to do it, because she thought that her vote was going to be more impactful.
It's definitely also really tough, because you're right. She may not have known all the votes were going to go on Julie, but let's just pretend she was correct and she knew every vote was going on Julie. The problem with throwing a stray vote at final 7 is you have very limited options on who to vote for. And you're also at the point in the game where you're now in the 26-day season. We're now at the point, Dylan, we're at day like 21 now out of 26. You're voting somebody out every single night. And the problem is, if she throws a stray vote onto Katora or onto Jake or onto D, are they going to want to work with her tomorrow? Probably not. I feel like if she tries to make a move, if I'm talking about Emily, she tries to save herself. And like you mentioned, there's a chance it wouldn't have mattered anyway, whether 2 votes went on her or whether it was 1-1 between Emily and like Katora, and then people vote out Emily on the revote. She probably had no out there. But the problem is that if you throw a straight vote onto like Katora, Jake, or D and you survive, the next day they're going to be coming after you, especially D is going to say, oh, you wrote my name down, you got to go. So I could see why people are saying to throw a hinky vote, but it also could really come back to bite you if the wrong person gets any votes. Rob actually brought this up on the podcast, though, and I completely forgot about this. In 42, and I just completely forgot about this vote, when Daniel got voted out right before the merge, when the Green tribe went to tribal council, that was Mike and Chanel's tribe. I forgot to save herself. Chanel did the same thing. Chanel knew it was going to be a split vote, so she throws a stray vote onto Mike just to kind of like protect against an idol. And then what happens is Daniel still goes home, but Mike gets pissed at Chanel. And then for the next 2 weeks before Chanel goes home, Mike is like, she's got to go. She's got to go. So if you throw a hinky vote, it might save you, but it could really sink your game with other people. So I could see also why Emily didn't do it.
Yeah, I think that's a major factor, right? And if you're Emily, the odds are you don't think Julie has an idol. And the odds are what? A 1 in 6 chance that the shot in the dark happens. And you already saw Caleb successfully play a shot in the dark. So I feel like you're probably like, all right, what are the odds that it actually happens twice in a row? Like, Mm-hmm. So I think, I think that it's very hindsight type thing. And something that I think is kind of being blown out of proportion a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I do have one more quick question for you before I know we do have some questions in the chat. So really quickly, again, this might be like results oriented thinking or hindsight bias, but would you now go back and look at any moves that Emily made and say she could have made a different move? Because the two things that I could point to and say, how would her game have been different is A, was taking out Bruce last week a mistake because Bruce still would have been in the game as a target if you had kind of done something else, or B, all the way back when they swapped and she chose Austin and Drew over Brando and Kendra, could that have changed her whole game? Because then she's working with Bello. Bello has the numbers, and with how fractured Bello is, could she really have rose to power? So would you say either of those two votes, whether it was the Bruce vote or the Brando vote, do you think she made a mistake at either of those votes? Basically?
I think probably if I could point to one, it's probably the Bruce vote, right? I think her big mistake was like making that move her move, right? So many people wanted to get out Bruce. But the fact that like she got him not to play the idol, and then everybody realized that like it was her that made like him not play the idol, like that became her move. So that, and I know that she mentioned this in her exit interview, like she said she didn't fight hard for Caleb to stay in the game at all. Like she kind of just realized like that was like what was going to happen, and Caleb was going to get voted out, and she didn't want to out herself as like somebody who was kind of going against the flow that early in the merge. But she said in her exit interview, she regrets that entirely. She thinks that if Caleb kind of maybe was able to last that vote, and who knows how far he could have got, and they could have been more powerful as a two. I think that was something we spoke about in this podcast. We're like, oh, it was kind of weird that like Emily kind of just went along with it. But yeah, that was definitely one thing also. But yeah, it is, everything's so hindsight. I don't think that a lot of people, I saw even people being like, oh, she's not a good strategic player. She did all this, like that's not true. Right. I think she did a good job, and she got screwed by what was, I think, a very interesting move by Austin, to say the least. So, and when I say interesting move, giving Julie the idol, not telling D. So I think she got screwed by a freak kind of situation.
Yeah. Right now, Dylan, before we get to questions, that's my biggest question, and we won't know until D or we won't know until Julie or Austin go home. Is we don't know for a fact if Austin asked for it back and Julie just said, no, it's mine, you gave it to me, I'm not going to give it back to you, or if Austin, and this would be the worst thing, if he was like, I'm not going to take it from her, she's Mama J, I'm not going to take it back from her. That's the biggest question for me, because like you said, we wouldn't even be in the situation, Emily wouldn't have been in the situation if Austin didn't give it to Julie in the first place, or at least got it back. So I'll be very curious to hear if Austin even asked, or if Julie was like, nah, I'm not giving this back to you. So
yeah, I would like to hear that also. Maybe we'll hear it either next week, maybe, or maybe post. Yeah. All right, let's get to questions here. We got one from J.E. He wants to know, could Austin potentially play the idol for D next week and then potentially get himself blindsided? I don't really see a situation that D's in danger, so I don't think that's going to happen. I again, I said the entire season. If you look, I know, like Jay, you're always in this. You've been listening to this podcast. I was like, I kind of get a sense that maybe he plays an idol for D at some point. I don't see a situation where D's in danger next week, unless like maybe Julie wins immunity. Then maybe the vote's between D and Drew. Like I don't know. Maybe Drew's like, all right, we can't vote out Julie. Let's just try and vote out D. But I don't think that, then it becomes a whole thing with him and Austin and Drew and Austin, and Drew knows that Austin wants D. And so I don't know how that works, but I think that the only way that could happen is, again, Julie winning immunity, which I guess she has a shot. She's done well in immunity challenges, but I don't really see this happening.
Yeah, I would agree that I feel like you never know. Is it possible that somehow D's name gets brought up? Yeah. But who's going to bring up D's name in this final 6? Because Austin is her number 1. Julie is her number 1. So that's already half the tribe that's not going to go for D, including D herself. So that's 3. So even if Drew somehow pulls in Katora and Jake, I don't think he goes for D. I think he goes for Julie again. So yeah, to Jay's point, could I see Austin playing an idol on D? I could if her name comes up, but I don't know if her name's going to come up.
Yep. Agreed there. And then this is interesting from Jay. He wants to know, another thing could be if somebody finds the idol that Julie played and uses it as well, do you think that idol will be found this week? I say that it doesn't get buried. I think that they'll probably just put an idol back into the game at Final 5 like they have done at the beginning of the finale. So that's when I think the next idol will come into play. I don't think they're going to rebury it this episode.
Yeah. I mean, we're at Final 6. I mean, I would like there to be no more idols and just have the one that Austin has in the amulets, but realistically, Bruce got voted out with an idol in his pocket. Julie played one. I'm hard pressed to think, but right before the finale, they don't try to hide one last idol in the game. So I do think whether it was Julie's idol or Bruce's idol, I'm sure one of them will come back. And I feel like if it's in the game, I feel like it's found. I would be very curious to hear in Survivor history, has there ever been an idol that's not been found ever? Maybe like very few. I know we had one earlier this season, like the Bella one was never found. But no, I do think that the idol will be found this week. And depending on who finds it, maybe it's used.
All right. And then I'm going to combine these two questions. So we have one from Ohio State for the win. He wants to know, is D strong at fire making, or do we know anything about her fire making skills? And then Jay wants to know, well, they also said that Julie's good at fire making. So maybe she ends up making fire as well. So basically the bottom line is D good at fire? Is Julie good at fire? I don't think we've heard much about it from them. I've heard some maybe people say that they kind of referred to Julie being okay at fire or good at fire, but I don't recall anything. So I'm not really sure to those questions.
I have no idea. I feel like there's been other times early on where we've seen fire being brought up. I can't think of it this season. If we ever see it, maybe it's next week, or as always, in the early parts of the finale, we see people start being like, "Oh, I'm the great fire maker. I'm a terrible fire maker." So right now, I have no way of knowing who would be good at it. The only person that I think would be good at it is someone like Bruce, who I feel like worked hard around camp. Obviously, Bruce is gone, but yeah, if you ask me right now to rank the 6 people in fire making, I would not know who's going to do better against others. And also we've seen times where like the fire making, like Tony and Sarah, it's very close. Like it could be a crapshoot anyway. So we don't know.
Yeah. All right. And then another question from Ohio State for the win. He wants to know, do you either of you see a way any non-original Reba member, so either Katura or Jake, can win this game? And if so, how could that happen? I'd be shocked if a non-Reba wins this season. So we're at the final 6 where there's 4 Reba members left. So assuming that it's a normal final 3, with the fire making and everything, we are guaranteed that at least one Reba sits at the final 3 at this point. So because of that, I'm going to say no chance for them. But again, because it's the new era and because we've seen some crazy things, I'll give them each a slight chance that they could pull off something miraculous. But normally I'd probably say no chance. What would need to happen in order for them to win? Probably one of them would need to have some kind of ridiculous advantage or idol play that is not in the game yet. That's what I really think would need to happen. Maybe like both of them go with Austin, and people don't respect Austin for being so close to D, and like they get mad at him for that, and then they kind of steal a win. Like I don't know what would need to happen, but I'm saying very, very slim for both of them.
Yeah, again, I'm going to cite the Gabler clause and say, like, I'm never going to say they have no chance to win. It's not 0, but it doesn't look great. I feel like Katurah and Jake really, really have a very slim chance of winning because the only way they can win is against each other. And maybe if Drew is there with them and people don't like Drew as much, I feel like against Austin D or D especially, but D, Julian, Austin, I feel like Jake and Katurah can't win. The only way Jake wins, because he really is getting like an Owen type of underdog edits, is if somehow he makes it to the end and people like give him credit for being the underdog. And Dylan as well, I don't think you can just do, one big move and get the votes because, Heidi did the ballsiest thing last season. She takes off her necklace, takes out Carson. She gets 1 vote for it. It didn't even matter. Jam Jam had it locked up. So it's like, what would Jake or Katurah as a non-Reba need to do? I feel like, kind of like Marianne and Omer, Jake or Katurah would have to engineer. I know earlier someone said, oh, would Austin play the idol on D? Jake or Katurah, in my opinion, would need to pull off a Marianne Omer move and take out D and be like, I just took out the biggest threat of the season. You have to crown me now. I feel like that's the only way I can see Jake and Katurah winning, because I just feel like right now I could see D, Julie, or Austin beating either of them.
Yeah, the only thing with Marianne that I would say is very different, and I agree with you, and we both agree it's very slim, is like Marianne, I think she was, once Omer was out of the game, it was so wide open. Once Omer was out of the game, it was so wide open. Whereas now it's like there's so many threats left. So I feel like that's why it's so tough for them. Whereas in a more wide open season like 42, I'd say there's a little bit more of a chance if D goes home.
Now the key here, though, Dylan, is that to your point, Reba is guaranteed final 3.
Right.
But the jury, again, it's a Bello jury. It's basically like, I mean, again, Caleb isn't like an honorary Bello person, and he's like the mayor of Ponderosa, and Emily's there. But you have Kelly, Kendra, and Bruce, and let's just assume Jake and Katurah both don't get there, and one of them goes on the jury. That's a primarily Bello jury. So even though Reba is going to get credit for steamrolling the game, it's a Bello jury. So you never know what could happen.
You never know, and that's the beauty of Survivor. But yeah, that's it for questions. I just wanted to say before we head off here, like,
Sure.
I love this season. I think we've had a great season. I think it's the best new era season, and I think that the 90 minutes have really got us to basically know everybody to the point where we feel these where we get heated in debates because somebody got voted out, right? I think that's the best part of Survivor is like you feel connected enough to these people that you either are hurt or happy when somebody goes home. And it feels like to me, it feels a little bit more like a 30s type season to me. And I love that. So I think that especially, in returnee seasons down the line, I think we're going to see a lot of these new players back. A lot of these players from 45 back, and I think it's going to age really well also. So just shout out to Survivor for really stepping up their game this season.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized my thoughts too. Definitely my favorite season so far of the new era. We'll see how the last 2 episodes play out because the finale is, I believe, on December 20th. But I really enjoyed it, putting the quits aside and some other journey shenanigans, having the 90 minutes, having classic things come back like the intro, the auction. This has really been a fun season. The Caleb through last night's vote with Emily or whatever. The last few votes have been extremely fun with like one exception. Can't wait to see what Survivor does next. I'm very happy that they're bringing back 90 minutes. And I really hope that this is a trend that continues because I think they are, again, stepping in the right direction.
Yep, for sure. Yep. And that's all we got this week. And Ryan, take it away.
All right. Only 2 episodes left of Survivor 45. Join us next week as we recap the final 6. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.